Well, hello. It's good to be with you today. I just want to start by saying I feel like I'm amongst my friends here. I've got my city council crew here from Saratoga Springs. I served in the city council from 2006 to 2010. If you can remember what our life was like back then in our area, fastest growing city in the area, probably one of the fastest growing in the state. And I tell people all the time that I served on the city council, I served on the school board, served in the legislature. Now I have this new role in the governor's office. And whenever I say, well, what was the hardest one you did? Without a doubt was my city council experience. So I have an incredible amount of respect. You have to deal with some of the hardest challenges that we face in the state of Utah. And you get to deal with it very directly with your constituents. And so just really appreciate all you're doing. And you really are laboratories of innovation. It's really fun to see as we're dealing with some of these problems, transportation, water, infrastructure, how every city's coming at it from a different approach, coming up with different ways to try to solve these problems. I love the fact that the League of Cities and Towns, as a legislator, would come up and really try to bring the voice of this group and talk about problems that we're seeing across the state and talk about ways that the state and our cities and our counties and our business community can really work together to solve these really big problems. It's been fun in my new role. I just had the opportunity to go out to Korea, and I was out there for a week. And is anybody here from Cottonwood Heights? Do we have anybody? Yeah, Cottonwood Heights folks here. We were out there. If anybody hasn't been out there, there's a campus out at the University of Utah. And we're out there talking about all the great things that we're doing in Utah, trying to build these partnerships. And I had somebody grab me and say, hey, you got to come over and check out this street over here. And so we walked over, and there's 6 campuses, that's the U and a number of other campuses. And then there's a street that goes right through the middle of it, and then they're building another 6 campuses. And this is in Incheon, which is like right in the heart of where the airport is, probably the fastest growing part of their country. And right there you see Cottonwood Heights, Utah Street, which I thought was the coolest thing to see one of our cities represented in what is going to be probably a main thoroughfare due to a relationship that Cottonwood Heights has built with that community. And then also you've got right there next to it the University of Utah. So it's really fun for me to get to see that when I go around the world. I am going to miss being a legislator. One of the things that I loved about being a legislator is I could just jump in and tackle problems. And a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I guess, when ChatGPT came out, that was the first thing. My background, I guess I should give a little bit about my background. I've been a very entrepreneurial person. I've invested in startups, doing venture capital, as well as done my own companies. And so I've been really fascinated by what's happening in the economy, how we're helping these new innovative companies come about. And I remember when ChatGPT came out 2 years ago. I mean, we've seen AI for a while, right? All of us that watch Netflix, it tells you, here's what you probably like. We've had algorithms for a while, but I think ChatGPT really changed the game. And when that came out, I remember reaching out to Kirk Collimore. Kirk and I both really get excited about this stuff. And I just said, hey, Kirk, we probably need to think about this. This might be something we want to talk about. So he and then we reached out to Margaret Bussey from the governor's office and said, let's put a small group together, and we'll try to figure out how to kind of work through this. We brought folks from academia. We had some really brilliant professors, a member that was a former Supreme Court justice, brought 3 or 4 practitioners, and we just started asking questions. I'm a big believer in the design thinking process, so if you're familiar with that, it comes out of the Stanford Design School. A lot of innovative companies have gone through that, and they go through this process of empathy, really trying to understand everything you can, put yourself in the shoes of the customer, defining the problem. I think that's really important. Sometimes we end up looking for solutions that don't really have a problem they're solving yet, but defining a problem, iterating, so you come up with ideas, try to iterate, prototype, and then test. And really, that's the process that we went through, and we were doing this. So we had this group of people and asking a lot of questions. And the whole idea was, how do we make sure that Utah is getting out ahead of this? And how do we make sure that we're putting the right guardrails around what we're doing in the state, but also making sure that Utah is a very light-touch, pro-innovation state? That's something we're known for. So we went through a process, 6 months of asking a lot of questions, and we just kept coming up with different ideas and different ideas. And we would start to run into roadblocks. One of the roadblocks that we ran into is we kept tying into data privacy. The more you get into AI, it's like, well, but how do you protect this information? Once you put information into these large language models, it's really hard to get that out. And so we actually split out the groups. We said, that's a big enough deal. Why don't we look at that through the lens of its own process? And I know many of you are affected by this bill. Some of it was a little hard, I get, because it was a pretty big bill. But that we moved out and said, let's allow data privacy to be its own effort. And whatever the platform may be, today it's AI, tomorrow it's quantum, whatever the next thing is, we need some fundamental data privacy that says, for the residents of the state of Utah, these are the protections that are in place. So we did work through that side of it. But when we went back to the AI side, what a lot of states were doing and what they were thinking about doing is just kind of painting a broad brush stroke across all AI. And we know that that's not how that works, right? Every industry has its own issues, its own challenges. So what we did the first year is we said, we're going to put some pretty fundamental things in place that are going to say, these are the things that we know should be safeguarded. Transparency is a big one. We were the first state to really push that. We talked a lot about, deep fakes, dealing with child pornography, using it for pornography, all of those different things. So we actually put all of those bills. We were the first state in the country to do anything around that. And then we thought, every one of these areas is going to have its own challenges. So let's create a learning lab, and that learning lab is going to bring experts in. And rather than waiting every year in the legislative session, and sometimes, unfortunately, bills get kind of rushed together and run, we want to really be deeply thinking about these things. And so we brought a guy named Zach Boyd. If any of you haven't met him, he's a brilliant professor that came out of BYU. Man, he's going to be mad about that. Out of BYU. I love the U too. But he came out of BYU, and then we brought a team around him. And last year we said, we're going to focus on a couple key areas. And the area that we really spent our time on last year was mental health. We know there's a huge need for mental health in the state of Utah. We just cannot provide enough resources, especially with our youth. In my area, I know in Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, the lines are months long to try to get into that. And there's these great new tools that are coming out, but it becomes a little scary when you think about, well, what are these kids getting when they're interacting with a bot? What about kind of hallucinations? How are they getting manipulated? We know there's been things that have been harmful to youth. So we wanted to put some really good safeguards around that. And so we put some key things. Obviously, transparency always is one of our more important things. But we said, if you're going to create this tool, you can't create it just as a marketing tool. You can't just say, hey, this is your problem. You could have every drug out there create their own bot and say, your solution is this. We gave them, rather than putting these heavy burdens on them, we actually said, if you follow these practices, and we put together best practices that we decided really were important for that industry, and you follow those things, then you will have some protections in place, right? Especially when it comes to OPLR. So dealing with our occupational licensing, giving them protection, saying you don't have a license for that, but as long as you're following these processes, you'll get an exemption from that. So there were a number of things like that we created. And as a result, we're able to move a lot faster. And you coupling that with our data privacy, right? So you have those two pieces together. Now we can have some safety and comfort, not to say it's perfect, but that we can now really leverage this tool. And that's what we really wanted to get to. And, I think about, and I do want to make a clarification when I just said tool, but you think about the amount of time and savings that we can use with AI, if it's used in the right way. The first person that I actually saw use it personally was my wife. My wife's a school teacher, and she is the furthest thing from being a techie. But my wife started learning about it. She got interested in it. Within a very short period of time, she told me she was saving about an hour a day in terms of communication. And of course, I said, you can't use PII. You got to make sure there's nothing in there that's sensitive. But an hour a day, whether it be lesson plans, drafting emails, courses, doing all of those different things, she was able to save an hour a day of her time. Now, at that point, there were no guardrails. There was nothing really saying don't do that. Thankfully, the superintendent and the governor came out after that and said, we've got some things we want to make sure you're doing this carefully. But when you think about that, if you have every teacher in the state of Utah that's saving an hour of time, the cost savings, of course, but also the time savings. If you talk to any teacher out there, the biggest thing they'll say that I need is more time. And if they have an hour extra time to do things, how important that would be for them. And that's what we're really working for, is how do we help make sure that our state and each of you on the city level can leverage this tool in the right way to really help improve efficiencies. The governor's right now working on a big strategic plan for AI. We've actually had a number of initiatives, workforce initiatives, policy initiatives, but the governor's looking at this on a bigger level and wanting to say, not only how do we leverage AI, make sure that we're providing the right workforce, but we also want to say, how do our state and city agencies really lean into this and use this in a way that can help all of our agencies move faster and be more productive. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. I'll just kind of go into next steps in terms of what I'm doing. So in my new role, I work with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. It's been really fascinating to see the result, the impact of some of the stuff that we're doing on the policy side here in Utah. I was in Cambridge a couple months ago, and we were meeting with a number of people. It was innovators, entrepreneurs. We had professors, one of who was a world-renowned professor in AI. And we introduced ourselves, and we just said, hey, we're from Utah. We're out here to try to find ways to work together. And this professor gets up, and he said, I can't believe you didn't even mention about what you're doing in artificial intelligence. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's cool that you know about that. And he said, you were the first state in the nation to do anything around AI, and you did it the right way. And he said, I go around to all over the world speaking on panels. He's an AI expert. And I always talk about the Utah plan. The Utah plan is the way we should do that. And even when the federal government just recently was going to do the shutdown, I don't know if you were following that, but they were going to do a moratorium on all AI. Their concern was you had some states that were going so heavy on it to literally just shut it down. And the reason we had our delegation really fighting back, that part of the reason they didn't end up doing that is because they saw states like Utah that were doing it well. To tie that into more of an economic development opportunity, we talk all the time to companies that say, we want to leave California. It's always California, right? But I should be careful when I say that, because some people don't want more people from California here. But we're tired of the way that they treat us. They don't really like our businesses anymore. They've put so many burdens on us. Their taxes are too high. The regulations are too high. I had a company just 2 days ago. It's a $1.5 billion revenue company. And he said, we want to come to Utah for one reason, and it's down to you and one other state. We know Utah still really loves business. They see the opportunity, economic development. They want to make sure businesses thrive. And we love the fact that you guys are thinking through this the right way. The other thing, and I think this ties into all of you, the other thing I hear often from businesses is the fact that Utah can move fast. In my role, I have a team of people all over the state of Utah. If you don't know them, I would love to help connect you to them. But I have people all over the state that work in different parts that help support every region of our state. And their whole goal is to making sure they can help you as you're working through your economic development opportunities. And for some of you, I remember when I was on the city council, we had one store, Smith's. I think I had one stoplight. And within a short amount of time, we were approving the Walmart and, this high school. And, it started to feel like this is a lot of work. And thankfully, I had a great team with me. But for some of our cities, they're these small towns. And all of a sudden, we're getting $1 billion company that wants to come in and do a large energy project. And that can be pretty overwhelming. Our team would love to help you with that. We'd love to help you put economic development plans together. We'd love to help support you, help you through that process, help connect you to the right people. So if you don't have anybody there, we'd love to connect you to doing that. But I see the opportunity for Utah is enormous. We couple kind of AI and energy together. We all know that we're heading for kind of an energy crisis. The demands on our grid are going to continue to get worse in terms of the amount of needs. We're talking about electrification of vehicles, everything that we're doing within the AI space. We need to scale up very quickly, and I appreciate the governor's effort on Operation Gigawatt to really be pushing to say we've got to go now. And again, going back to that local thing, we just did a groundbreaking for a company called Valor Atomics out of Emory, down by San Rafael. And I had the opportunity to talk to them, the CEO. We were there for their groundbreaking. And we said, so what is it that made you come to Utah? You know, they had 20 or so different states. Everybody right now is leaning into nuclear. And Utah is one that's very aggressively looking at nuclear as an option. And they said, it's the fact that I could get together with my city, my county, my state level officials, and the governor. I got in front of the Senate president and the speaker. I could do all of that in 2 weeks. There is no other state in the country that has the ability to be that nimble. And so that's the reason that they came to Utah. And so I think that is what our secret sauce, I know we always talk about the secret sauce, and some people think that's a little cliche, but it's the reality. We know how to work together. I jokingly say we're one, and I know sometimes from a city side we don't love the legislature, the state level people, but one thing that I do love about the state is the governor, the speaker, and the president really do work well together. And when they are leaning in together, we can get stuff done quicker than any other state in the country, and I do know that. But at the end of the day, I know it's this group here, it's the people on the ground doing the hard things, making it all happen. And so again, I just want to say thank you so much. Going forward, again, as I mentioned, as you're looking through projects, as you're seeing opportunities, I am right now going through reorganization in my team as I've taken it over. We're going to be leaning a lot more aggressively on outward-facing activities, marketing activities. So if there's things that you're looking for that you need support from the state on how to present your community or how to present the state of Utah as a way to attract people to your city or to your county, please let me know. We're happy to help with that. So just to wrap up one more time, again, I just want to say thank you all so much for everything that you do, and good work, and keep the good work going. So appreciate it.